Hey guys, welcome to part one of three where we're going to be working with the MDT wizard, and specifically we're going to be customizing the MDT wizard that you get right out of the box when you install MDT. And I know some of you guys are probably already saying, well, why would you even make this video? Why would you even use the MDT wizard, much less take the time to customize it, right? Isn't the whole point of this crazy MDT business to create a completely unattended automated deployment process? And yeah, you're pretty much correct. You're 100% correct for the most part. 99.9% of the time you guys are probably going to have a completely automated deployment. But there are deployment scenarios that do require manual input and sometimes require manual input of proprietary information. So in order to accomplish that, you'll need a custom MDT wizard pane. So in this particular video, in this part one, I'm going to kind of walk through some of those scenarios that will require a custom wizard pane, and I'm also going to introduce you guys to this really neat tool that's called the MDT Wizard Studio, or the MDT Wizard Editor. It's a pretty awesome tool in my opinion. So if you guys already understand how the tool works, if you guys have already yourself created some custom wizard panes, then you guys can skip to the second part of the series where I actually start getting into the nitty-gritty of the Wizard Studio and we actually start customizing some things. But for you guys who are completely new to the whole concept of customizing the MDT wizard, go ahead and stick around because it's going to be a pretty fun video. So before I show you guys what the MDT Wizard Studio looks like, let me just run down a recent scenario where I actually had to create a custom wizard pane. So recently there was a company that brought me in because their help desk was just having a really hard time keeping track of all the devices that were in their environment. You know, we're talking 20 some odd thousand devices, right? And we were in the middle of a XP to 7 migration. So one of the reasons they brought me in was to kind of get this migration kickstarted from XP to 7. And so one of the guys higher up decided that the best way to revise their current inventory process was to create thousands and thousands and thousands of these little asset tag stickers. So the way it would work is, you know, they would receive this shipment of new desktops and the deployment techs would stick these asset tags on the machine and then start the imaging process. But what they wanted to do was not only stick these little stickers on the physical hardware, but they also wanted to create a host name for each device that was a combination of the serial number and that asset tag. So what they wanted ideally was for the deployment techs to be able to put a sticker on, power up the machine, load the boot image, start loading the task sequence, and then immediately get presented with a window or a wizard pane that asks them to put in some characters from the asset tag. And then once they click next or OK, that number, whatever they put in there, would be appended to the OSD computer name property. So I said, okay, we can do that. And I'm going to show you guys in part two how I actually was able to accommodate that. But that's just one example, just being able to put in some kind of text and append it to the OSD computer name. Very simple, very basic scenario. And then there's another scenario where the same company, matter of fact, they also wanted to be able to perform certain actions based on the department. So for example, they wanted to be able to have a task sequence for the engineering department, a task sequence for marketing, for sales. They also wanted to be able to install applications based on department. And so what they wanted in that scenario was they wanted the deployment techs or their help desk in the future to be able to select the department from a drop-down menu and then go about the task sequence. You know, choose a particular task sequence based on the department. And so again, I had to come in and create a wizard pane that populated the drop-down box with all their departments and then performed a certain action based on that value. So that's number 2. That one is a little more intricate than just entering some text and appending it to an existing property. And then the third scenario is similar to department, but instead of department, they wanted to perform a deployment based on geographical location. So there was a company that had branch offices in California, Chicago, they had some in Florida. So they had all kinds of branch offices, and they wanted a task sequence per geographical location. And so they wanted their help desk to be able to choose the branch office location from a drop-down, and then it'll select the appropriate task sequence from there. So that's the third scenario. So just another quick rundown. It was asset tag, which was just basic text input. Then you have deployment based on a department, which is a drop-down. And then you have deployment based on branch office location, which is also a drop-down. So those are 3, I would say the top 3. There are others, of course, but those are the top 3 deployment scenarios that required me, at least, to create some custom wizard panes. So before we actually start customizing anything, and before I actually show you guys the MDT Wizard Studio, let me say this. This is extremely, 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 extremely important. I can't say it enough. Make sure before you do anything that you guys make a fresh copy of the scripts that are in your deployment share. Let me show you what I mean. Here's my production deployment share located on the root of my C drive. If I go to the scripts folder, I have all these scripts in here, right? We do not want to edit these when we're customizing the MDT wizard panes. Okay, these are production ready, so obviously, right, you guys don't want to touch those. So I would recommend that you guys copy these and put them somewhere. What I did was I went into documents and I created deployment share copies. So I have my current deployment share scripts, the original scripts that came with MDT out of the box, and then I have one for revisions. Now in this folder is going to be the original scripts that come with MDT out of the box, but we're going to tweak these. These are the ones we're actually going to tweak. So it's empty now, but in part 2 I'll actually have some scripts in here. So I just want you guys to kind of take some time to create a fresh copy of the scripts that you have, because if not, there's definitely some damage you can do, because that Wizard Studio directly edits the scripts that it points to. So if you're pointing to some of the scripts and XML files that are in your production deployment share, guess what's going to get edited? Those files. So you want to make sure that you're pointing to a fresh copy of the scripts that you have. Okay? So without further ado, now that we have all that fun stuff out there, let me actually show you what the Wizard Studio looks like. The first thing that you guys are going to have to do is download the MDT Wizard Studio, and I'll put the link to the application itself will be in the description for this video. And once you download it, it's going to be in this format here. It's going to be a .application file, which is an application manifest file. Once you run this, what will happen is, and I'll show you guys, you'll get this. It'll actually go out to the internet, so make sure you guys have your NIC enabled. Make sure you guys can get out to the internet. And then you guys will eventually be presented with this wizard editor, right? This is what it looks like. But let me take a step back for a second, because really all this thing is doing is pointing to a .exe file. When you run this for the first time, there's a .exe that gets placed, and it's really hidden, so I'm going to show you guys in a minute where it is. But this .exe file appears, and all this manifest does is, after the first time you run it, all it does is just executes the exe. So I figured, well, instead of doing that and going through this business every time, why don't I just execute that file directly? So let me show you guys where it is. You want to navigate to the app data folder of the user that you're currently logged on as. And the easiest way to do that is to just use an environment variable called local app data. There you go. You want to go into apps, And once you're in apps, you can dig through all the folders, but what I would recommend is that you guys just do a search, if I can spell today, for MDT Wizard Studio. There you go. So you can already see the .exe down there. And once you find it, you can go ahead and just right click and then create a shortcut. So that's why you guys see this shortcut here. That's all it is. This gives you the exact same window that the manifest file does. It still opens the editor. So you get the same results, just a little faster, and you don't have to deal with connections out to the internet. Now you can edit offline if you want to. So that's the real benefit. So now that we've covered the deployment scenarios that require custom wizard panes, now you guys know how to actually download it, you guys know how to open it, and you guys know what kind of prerequisites you need to fulfill, which is, making a fresh copy of the scripts that you have. Now that you guys have all of this information, now we can actually start getting into the nitty-gritty of how to customize the MDT Wizard. And that will be in part 2. Stick around. There's a lot of fun stuff to come. Alright, hey guys, welcome back. We are now on part 2 of the 3-part series on customizing the MDT Wizard. So in part 1, we went over some of the deployment scenarios that actually require you to customize the MDT Wizard. And we had a brief introduction to what you guys are looking at now, which is the MDT Wizard Editor or Wizard Studio. And we also covered some of the prerequisites, which I'll repeat again because I can't emphasize them enough. And that is, make sure that you guys create a fresh copy of the scripts that are contained in the script root of your deployment share, because we do not want to edit the production scripts that you guys are currently using in your environment. So just make sure you guys copy whatever is in the scripts folder contained in your deployment share. And if you like, guys, you guys actually don't have to do any of this customization on your production MDT server. You guys can actually just take a client machine. If you guys have a virtual environment at your disposal, you guys can actually just stand up a Windows 7 client machine or Windows 8 client machine and just put MDT on it. MDT doesn't need to be on a server version of Windows. You can actually put it on a client version. So you can install MDT and the ADK, and you can do the same thing that we're doing here on Windows 2012. You can just do it on Windows 7 or Windows 8 or Windows 8.1 if you like. So in either case, now that we have the prerequisites out the way, let's go ahead and jump right into customizing the wizard pane. And then in this part 2, in this demo, we're going to be doing the first of the 3 deployment scenarios I told you about in part 1. And that one was the asset tag scenario, where we want to present the deployment techs or help desk technicians or whoever's going to be imaging some machines. We want to present them with a wizard pane that allows them to type in some characters from an asset tag sticker and have those characters be appended or added to the OSD computer name. Okay, and specifically also in this demo, we'll do a computer name that is a combination of serial number plus the asset tag. Okay, so that's what we'll do here. So step 1 for me is to minimize the MDT Wizard. We're going to go to Documents, and if you remember from part 1, I have this deployment share copies folder that has my current deployment share scripts, the original out of the box scripts, and then I have an empty revisions folder. And in this folder, I'm going to go ahead and do a Control A, get everything in here, do a Control C. And I'm going to dump all of these original scripts that MDT gives me out of the box. I'm going to dump them in this revisions folder because these are the ones I'm going to tweak. I like to keep this original folder untouched so that I can do as many revisions as I want. Okay, so now that we have all of our scripts in here, we can go ahead and go back to the wizard editor, go to File, go to Open, and we're looking for this guy right here, deploywiz _definition _enu .xml. This guy has all of the wizard panes that MDT gives you right out of the box. So let's go ahead and open this guy. And there we go. Look at all the little wizard panes that we have here. I'm sure you guys are familiar with all of these by now. There's a cool little preview tab where you can actually see what these guys look like. And here's an HTML tab that contains all of the code that actually gives you all of this stuff here. All of this text, all the cute little icons that you have is all in here. Okay? And then you have the settings. And this is where all of the magic happens. You see this custom script here. This is the VB script that contains all of the functionality. You know, the HTML is just the visual, right? It gives you all of this. But behind the scenes, under the hood, this is all the fun stuff that you have in here. So now that we have loaded this XML file that has all the wizard panes in it, what you need to do is figure out which one of the existing wizard panes you can use as a template for what you're trying to do. So remember, in the scenario that we're using in this demo, we're trying to type in some characters from an asset tag, which means I need a text box, right? So if I go to the preview tab and start looking at all these different panes, I know that this is the one that I want to use because it provides me with a cute little text box up here, and I can get rid of all of this other mess here, all of the domain stuff. We don't need any of that. All we're doing is we're just typing some stuff into a text box. All we need to do. So now that I know that the computer name wizard pane is the one I want to use as a template, there's one thing that I need to do before I start customizing anything. So I need to minimize the wizard editor, and I need to find this computername.vbs file, deploywiz computername.vbs. I'm going to take this guy and copy it. I'm going to go to this temp folder that I created for the sole purpose of renaming things. You guys can rename them within the actual folder yourself if you like, but just to make it nice and clean, I just take it out to a folder, rename it, and put it back. So since we're going to do an asset tag here, the whole point is to type in some asset tag characters. I'm going to call this my asset tag, and always leave the deploywiz underscore there. Okay, now that we have him nice and renamed, we're going to do a cut, and we're going to put him back where he came from. There we go. So now I can go back into the wizard editor, and in a minute I'm going to show you what the importance of renaming that file is. So now we can go ahead and we can right click and we can do copy. And actually, before I do copy, let me hop to the settings tab so you guys can see what I'm going to do here in a minute. So we're going to do right click and do copy, hopefully. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll do right click, copy, and then do right click and do paste. There we go. So for the pane ID, I'm going to call that my asset tag. You guys will start to see the pattern here in a second. The file name is going to be the same as you see up here. You see where it says title, it says computer details to the right, and then you see where it says deploywiz underscore computername.xml. We're going to use the same format here. So the file name that we're creating here is the XML file that contains some of the data that we need. So this will be deploywiz underscore my asset tag, and you don't have to put .xml, it'll automatically append that extension for you. Okay, now you see we have our own little pane in here, right? My asset tag. And if you look at the preview, it looks just like the computer name pane that we copied. So the first thing that I want to do is start making it look like my asset tag instead of computer name. So I'm going to change this title here from computer details to asset tag, step number 1. And then I'm going to hop on over to HTML, and I'm going to get rid of all the mess that I don't need. So I know that the only thing I need is this table. This table contains all the computer name stuff. So anything below that, I do not need. So I'm just going to highlight all of that and do that right there. See? So now we're left with just this table. Get rid of those extra lines. There we go. How easy was that, right? So now we're left with the text box that we need. That's all we need on this whole page. Now what I want to do is change this text from computer name to asset tag. And in the process, we're going to get rid of what's called a hotkey or access key here. That's why this T has an underscore in it. We're going to get rid of that because we don't need that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to get rid of the access key, which is over here. And then we're going to change computer name. You see where we have computer name. We're going to leave the colon. We'll call that asset tag. Hey, how cool is that, huh? We're making some progress here, guys. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to remove all of the references from OSD computer name. We want to change it to my asset tag. Okay, so this is super easy. All we're doing is we're just replacing text. And I'll copy that to the clipboard to make this a lot easier. There we go. And we'll get rid of this guy as well. And this is extremely important. You want to change this from validate computer name to validate asset tag, or validate my asset tag, I'm sorry. This guy right here, this refers to a VB script function, a function that's contained in the VB script that controls the whole functionality of this wizard pane. So you want to make sure that this is correct. Okay, now that we have that, we're ready to rock and roll, man. How easy was that? So just to recap, we got rid of all of the extra domain stuff. So this is what it used to look like. This is what we copied. This is the original. So we had join a domain, all this other stuff. We got rid of that. We trimmed the fat, and we're left with a regular text box, and we have the text that we want, asset tag. And if you guys want, you can customize this little icon here. It's a little blue screen monitor with a check in it. That's this guy right here. And if you hop into your deployment share, the copies that we're using here, if you sort by type, you'll see we have plenty of little PNG files here, all different kinds of images. So if you want to customize it, you can put whatever icon you want in there. But that's the first half. We're already halfway done. It's pretty cool, huh? So the next thing that we want to do is we want to get rid of this reference to the old deploywiz underscore computername.vbs. Because remember, we renamed it. We copied it, renamed it, and put it back. So we want to remove this. You want to right-click anywhere in this box and go to Add, Custom Script, and point it to this guy. Remember him? We renamed him and put him back here. All right, so now we have a nice little VB script in here. All right, you see these little initialization and validation entries in here? The only thing you guys need to know is that these guys point to VB script functions as well. So for example, we have one that says initialize computer name. If you hop into custom script, you can see the first function that appears is initialize computer name, right? So what we want to do is we want to rename that to initialize my asset tag. And we also want to remove the references to functions that we do not need anymore. So we don't need any of that domain stuff, remember? So we're just going to remove this guy. We're going to remove him as well. And we're going to remove this guy. And then we're going to change this to my asset tag. We'll capitalize that T there. Okay. And we'll change that as well. Now, keep in mind that when you change these do not change the function name. See? Still the same. This just changes the reference to the function. This reference is contained in that myAssetTag.xml file, right? So just keep in mind that just because we renamed it here, we still have to rename it in here. And that's actually what we're going to get into in part 3. We're going to start editing the VB script. We're going to start changing the references from OSD computer name to myAssetTag. I'm going to explain what this VB script is doing, and then we'll actually do a live run. We'll go ahead and test it out and see how it works. Okay? So just to recap, this part 2 is what we've done is we've pointed to the what they call a definitions file, which was that deploywiz definition enu.xml file, which gives us all these little wizard panes. We found one that could be our template, which was this guy, because it has the text box that we need. We copied it, renamed it to myAssetTag. We got rid of all the extraneous stuff, all the mess that we don't need, which left us with just the text box and just the text that we need. And we also cleaned up some of the references to functions that we do not need in that VB script. We just completely removed those guys. Okay? So pretty simple stuff. Again, I know it may seem like it's pretty lengthy, like there's a lot of steps in here, but trust me, I promise guys, once you do this once or twice, you'll be able to do this in less than 30 minutes. I guarantee you guys will blow through this stuff in no time. Absolutely guarantee it, okay? So just stick with me, guys. I know it seems like there's a lot of stuff here, but stick with it. And when we get to part 3, and I may even make a part 4 depending on how long part 3 runs, but now we're getting into the exciting stuff. So stay tuned for part 3. We're going to edit this VB script, and we're going to start getting into the dry run and see how this actually works. Welcome back. We are finally at part 3 of this series where we are customizing the MDT wizard. And I'm not sure if I'm going to make a 4th video or not. We'll see how long this video goes, because there's really 2 tests that we have to do. Once we're done customizing this VB script here in a minute, we're going to test within the wizard editor itself, within this wizard studio. And then, of course, we have the live deployment that we actually have to test. So there's a lot of testing that we have to do. So we'll see how long this video goes, but it's going to be pretty exciting either way. So what I would like to do is let's go ahead and let's just jump right into customizing this VB script, which is where we left off. Remember that what we've done so far is we've customized the HTML, which is the visual, right? So now we have this pretty little text box and the asset tag text. We have all that stuff, which is great. But that's the visual. We need some functionality as well, and that's where the VB script on the back end comes in. So now what I want to do is I want to start by renaming the functions, because if you remember, we renamed the pointers to the functions, but that doesn't rename the function itself. So let's go ahead and rename this my asset tag, just like everything else. And we'll do that for the validate function as well. And there's a couple instances of OSD computer name that I'm going to leave here so I can explain a couple things to you guys. But for the most part, really, we're going to do the same thing that we did on the HTML tab, and we're just going to remove pretty much all of the references to OSD computer name. So we're going to do skip my asset tag. I'm going to explain the value of that a little bit later. This as well. And we're going to change this guy here. And remember, this function is no longer validate computer name. It's validate my asset tag. So we're going to change all the references to that function. And we'll get rid of that E, or else we'll have a big problem later. Okay, so I'm sure as you guys have noticed now, I left this one here, and I left this guy here as well. And here's the reason for that. We're actually going to get rid of both of these if statements. So here's if statement number 1 we're going to get rid of. The reason for this is this says if the OSD computer name property is blank, meaning no one has specified a computer name, then we're going to generate a random host name with this utility that's kind of built into MDT here. So we don't want that. We don't want to use that utility. So we're going to completely remove that because we don't want to generate a random asset tag. We definitely don't want to generate one that's in the format of a wacky host name, right? So we're going to get rid of that if statement altogether. And then I'm going to replace this here. Technically, you guys can leave this here if you want. You really could. But I don't want to validate the asset tag as if it is a host name. I don't want to use that same validation criteria for a host name on this asset tag. So instead, I'm going to take this statement right here, which by the way says if the length of the asset tag is greater than 15 characters, then we're going to scream at you a little bit. And that's because, remember, this used to be a computer name function. So computer name or host name cannot be longer than 15 characters, as you guys probably already know. So we're going to keep that same criteria for the asset tag because, well, we're adding the asset tag to the computer name, which means the asset tag can't be greater than 15 characters, right? So we're going to change that to less than. So now we're saying if the length of the asset tag is greater than 15, we're going to scream, but if it is less than, let's go ahead and continue with the validation process, okay? Now, that is all we have to do here for these two functions. All we did was just remove all the references to OSD computer name, and then we just removed two if statements, right? It's pretty simple, right? Now, you guys are probably wondering about all of this mess down here. And we actually don't need it. We don't need a single bit of that stuff. Just like up in the HTML tab where we removed all of the HTML stuff for the domain mess, all the joining domain or join a workgroup stuff, we don't need any of that in the VB script either. So the good news is someone has already separated the two with these apostrophes, the character that we use to comment stuff out in the VB world. So now we can actually just take all the stuff below there and just get rid of it. We don't care about a single bit of this stuff. None of it. Not one. And we can scroll back up to the top. We'll get rid of some of these extra lines just to make it a little prettier. And essentially, we are done editing this VB script. That is it. Again, all we did was just take all the references to OSD computer name, change them to my asset tag, remove all the fluff, all the extra stuff that we don't need. Now we're ready to rock and roll. I'm going to go ahead and save it at this point, and I'm going to add two more things. You notice we have custom script, initialization, and validation, right? But if you go back to the wizard pane that we're using as a template, there's some other things in here. There's two conditions in here, and I actually want to incorporate these as well. And I'm going to explain them in just a bit. Let's go ahead and copy them first. You can right-click anywhere in this box and go to condition, and we're just going to do a paste. And let me explain what this is. So this condition is the condition under which we will actually display this page. And we're going to put my asset tag. So if we specify in the MDT rules tab or the database or in the custom settings.ini file as well, if we specify the skip asset tag property and set it equal to yes, then we're going to bypass this page. But if we don't specify it, or if it does not equal yes, then we're going to go ahead and display this page. So that's what this is here. This is do not equal. So if skip my asset tag does not equal yes, then we must not be trying to skip it. So we're going to show this page. And then there's one more condition here. This one you do not have to copy at all. I'm doing it just for consistency's sake. I'm going to right click and do condition. Paste that in there, and I'm not going to change anything in here. Basically this is saying if the deployment type is not replace, if it's not a replace scenario, if it's not a custom scenario, and if it's not a state restore scenario, then we'll go ahead and show this page. Otherwise, we won't. Now, you guys can leave this completely blank if you want. You guys don't even have to put this condition in there, because you can say, hey, we'll just show this wizard all the time, as long as we're not skipping the page. So I'm putting it in there just for consistency's sake, but I wanted you guys to see how these conditions work. Okay, so we are done essentially with customizing the wizard pane in the VB script. Now the next thing to do before we move on to the live deployment test is we want to test within the wizard editor itself, within this wizard studio. And we want to go to this wizard menu option up here and click the test button. And now what's happening is, what you're seeing is, you know, at the beginning of every task sequence there's that gather local only step. And basically what that does is that calls the ZTI gather script, and that collects all kinds of information about the machine you're trying to deploy an image to. And all that information gets stored into the appropriate variables, which is what you're looking at now. This is essentially what gets stored into that variables.dat file that I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about. So you can see there's all kinds of information: make, model, existing host name, MAC address, default gateway, all kinds of stuff, right? But for this test, you guys actually don't really need any of this stuff. We really don't care about any of this, but it provides it to you just in case you want to look at it. One thing I do want to note is, by default, MDT already captures what they call an asset tag field, but it's obviously not the same asset tag that we're trying to capture. We're trying to capture some data that's on a sticker that we're putting on a physical desktop, right? This is something else entirely, and it's always null because of the query that MDT uses to assign this value. It's actually completely irrelevant. I'm not sure why it's even in here. But I just want to make sure we distinguish between asset tag and my asset tag, which I'll show you in a bit. Okay, so now we're going to click the run button here, and it's going to launch this wizard. And okay, well, here's the first problem. Not actually a problem, but you can see that we have the asset tag wizard pane is number 3 in this list. We have task sequence, which is highlighted, then below that is computer details, and then asset tag. So I want to change that real quick here. Here's how you do that. We'll exit out of here, go to my asset tag, and we're just going to drag it all the way up to the tippy top. Then hit save. Go back to wizard, test. We'll collect all this information yet again. We'll get this nice little GUI here again, this little table, and we'll go to run, and now we should have asset tag at the very top. And look, so we have the same error handling that the computer name wizard pane had. So we're telling the user, hey, look, this is required. Got a nice little asterisk there, and we have a orange yellowy background saying, hey, look, you got to put some information in here. And let's test out some other error handling as well. Let's go ahead and hold down the number 1, and look, it screams at us and says, hey, look, you can only have 15 characters, man. So let's close out of that, and let's start putting some data in here. Let's actually put 11223344, and we'll hit next. And as long as you can get to this part right here with no errors, you are ready to rock and roll. Don't be scared if you don't see anything in task sequences, because remember, all we copied over was the scripts in the deployment share. We didn't copy the entire deployment share. So in order for me to have some task sequences in here, I have to be looking at the control folder that has the ts.xml files that contain all the task sequence information. But this wizard that we launched is not in our production deployment share. So that's why we don't see any of that stuff. But the fact that we got here means that we're on the right track. We're doing well. So let's close out of here. And there's one last thing I want to show you before we move on to the next video, because we are running a little past 10 minutes here. So let's cancel out of here, and I want to show you that there's some green cells here at the bottom. Here they go. And this tells me that I did not complete the wizard. That's what the N is for. It'll be Y once we actually complete it. And then there's a definition cell that just tells us what file we're using to populate all the wizard panes. The only reason I bring this up is I want to get you guys in the habit of scrolling all the way down to the bottom to see the relevant information. It's a little misleading here when you see the old value and the new value, right? We don't really want to look at that because we care about just the green stuff. We care about just the green cells. That's all you really need to know. And you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom so you can see it. So I just want to make you guys aware of that so you get in the habit of looking at it. So what we are going to do for part 4 is we're going to do one more test in the MDT editor, but we're going to do it in the production deployment share so we can go through the entire wizard. Once that is done, then we can do a real live deployment and see if this stuff actually works. Okay, so let me end this video right here, and then we'll get right into part 4 and we'll see if this stuff actually works. How awesome is that, huh? So I know it's been a long process. Just hang tight with me, guys. I know it seems like there's a lot of stuff in here, but I promise you guys, once we go through this 1 time, 2 times, you guys will knock this stuff out in no time, okay? So thanks for hanging tight with me, guys, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Have a good one. So, all right, hey guys, we are at part 4 now, which may or may not be the end. We'll see. It depends on how long this video runs as well, but we're getting closer to the finish line, guys. We're just about done. So in part 3, we customized that VB script. We finally finished everything we needed to do in the Wizard Editor and the Wizard Studio. We went ahead and ran a test which told us that our wizard pane looks exactly like we want it to. It has the error handling that we want it to. If you put in more than 15 characters, it screams at you. It tells you that it's a required field. You have to put some information in there. And we know that there aren't any errors at this point. So we're good to go. We just have 2 more things that we need to do. We need to test in the production deployment share. So I'm going to show you how to add this custom pane that we've developed into your existing definitions file that has all your other regular panes in it. We'll do that. Then we'll test in the regular production share. And then we'll do a live deployment test. And we'll see if the OSD computer name actually receives the asset tag value that we input in the wizard. So it's going to be pretty exciting stuff here. So let's jump right into it. So what we're looking at now in the wizard editor is everything we've done so far. So remember what we did was we took a copy of the original definitions XML file that has all these wizard panes in it. We added our own pane to it. And now we need to take this one pane, not this collection of panes, but just this one pane, and we need to add it to what's in our production share, our production deployment share. Okay? So here's how we do that. The first thing we have to do is we have to copy the files that we created for this pane, which is the myassettag.vbs and the myassettag.xml files. Those are the 2 that we need. So let's go ahead and let's grab them first. So I'm going to go to Documents, Deployment Share Copies. Remember, everything I've done so far has been within the revisions folder. And I'm going to take these 2 guys right here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy them to my production deployment share into scripts, and we'll dump them right in there. Okay? So now that we've done that, I can hop back in the wizard editor, and I'm going to go to File and then Open, and see right now we're in revisions. I'm going to go all the way back to my actual production deployment share. Then I'm going to go to Scripts, and now we can load the original definition file. Okay, so now you can see all of this stuff here. It's really just like the regular out of the box, right? Now, if you want to see the one that's a little more custom, by the way, just so you can see what it would look like if you had a ton of wizard panes in here, you go to Open, and let's go to Documents, Deployment Share Copies, current, and we'll go here. You see, this one is a little more custom. See, I have asset ID, select branch, department, and these are what we're going to get into in another series of videos. We're going to show you how to do some cooler things where we have branch offices we can select, and then we have departments we can select from. But that's for another time. I just want you guys to kind of see what it looks like. So let's go back to our regular deployment share. And we'll go to scripts and then definition. There it is. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to import a pane, and we're going to point to the XML file that we brought over. That would be this guy. And we want it to be at the very top. See, it looks just like we left it. Good deal. Okay, so now we want to go ahead and save it, and we're done. We've already added it to our production deployment share. Now we just want to go to Wizard, Test, like we did before. Here we go, same variables because we're on the same machine. Now, let's hit run and see what we get. We're going to launch the wizard that's inside of our production deployment share. I'll put in 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. Now let's see what we get. Now we've got some task sequences because we're in the production environment. And you know, honestly, I'm not really sure. Let's just pick one. We'll pick this one here. Go to next, and we're just going to join a work group. None of this is actually going to happen, but we're just going to try to get through the whole wizard. I'm not going to back anything up. No product key. Time zone's okay. I'll just put password in there. And the credentials that I'll need to access any network stuff, but we're not doing anything yet. Okay, so we're done. We have all the stuff that we're specifying here. We'll hit begin. And here we go. Now remember, we don't really care about any of this stuff here. We just want to go all the way down to the bottom. There we go. Everything in green is what we care about. So you notice we did complete the wizard. That's why the Y is there. And here is the variable that we care about, my asset tag. And it is 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. That's the only thing we really care about. I mean, we can see now what some of the information is with the rest of the task sequence, but really the only thing we care about is the fact that our variable was set correctly, which is awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So now we're good to go. Now we can actually start getting into the live deployment test. So here we go. Let's close out of the editor altogether. We no longer need it. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to hop into the deployment workbench, and we're going to tweak some things here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Properties and go to the Rules tab. And you can see I already have some properties selected here because I've done so many custom wizard panes. I'm going to add another one to this list. Remember what we put in before? Remember we specified a condition that was skip my asset tag? So what we're going to do is we're going to put skip asset tag in here as a property. We're not going to use it yet because we want to see it, but we do want to put it in here and add it to the list. So we're going to do skip my asset tag. Okay? We're not going to use it yet, but I just want to make sure it's listed in this list of properties here. Alright, just want to make sure everything is good to go. Everything looks good here. I'm not going to skip the task sequence. I do want to get presented with that. So that's two things that we're going to see here. We're going to get prompted for a task sequence, and we should get prompted for an asset tag as well. The most important part is the OSD computer name right here. So you can see I have some crazy things going on here. Let's tidy this up a little bit. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to take the serial number Sorry, we'll take that. So let's take the serial number and we'll take the asset tag. We'll do my asset tag. Okay, so we should get serial number plus my asset tag. Actually, I tell you what, let's not do serial number because the serial number of VirtualBox VMs is always 0 for whatever reason. So let's not do serial number. Let's do something like what I had before. We will do let's take the model and we'll do the first 7 characters starting from the left of the model variable. How about that? Okay, so let's do that and let's see how this works. So we should have part of the model name followed by the asset tag. Okay, so let's do apply here. We'll do OK, and I'll do a refresh here just to be on the safe side, and away we go. So let's go ahead and let's see what kind of VM I want here. We'll just pick one of these guys. Okay, so I'm going to start up this VM hopefully at some point today. We'll do F12. We're going to boot from the network. This is me pixie booting. We'll load this boot image here. So you can see here. And if you guys aren't familiar yet, we're using WDS right now for the pixie boot functionality. That's why we're able to do this over the network. And we'll let that load here. And once this thing finishes loading, the very first thing that we should see is we should get prompted for the wizard. The wizard should launch, and the very first thing we should see is the asset tag. We'll put in an asset tag, and then we'll choose a task sequence, and then we'll verify if the computer name is what we want it to be. Okay? Okay, fingers crossed. Let's see what we get. Okay, we're loading the boot image. And again, since this is MDT 2013, the light touch images that we have, the boot images are all, Windows 8 and later. Looks okay so far. We're launching the wizard. We're parsing the bootstrap.ini file right now. Okay, good so far. Processing the custom settings.ini right now. Hey, there we go. How awesome does that look? Sight for sore eyes. So let's go ahead and let's put in, now remember, we're capturing the first 7 characters of the model, which means I can only put in an 8-character asset tag. So I'll put in 1, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. And we'll go ahead and go to next. And we'll just pick a random task sequence here and hit next. And once our task sequence starts, I should have a little message here that'll tell me what task sequence I'm running and on what machine I'm running it on. And hopefully the computer name that it shows me is exactly what we think it is. So let's see. Aha! Well, part of it is good. So we have the asset tag. It took the asset tag, but obviously I made a mistake somewhere with the syntax of the model variable. So I'm sure I can go back and figure out what that is. But the good news is that the asset tag works. Oh, of course I did. Sometimes. And we also need quotes around the model. So there's our problem there. So let's actually hit apply, hit OK. We'll do a refresh, and let's take another crack at it real quick. We'll just power that off. And I'll tell you what, let's just try a completely different machine here. Okay, and we'll do the same thing here. We'll go ahead and we'll load this boot image, and we'll parse that bootstrap.ini file. We'll go through the custom settings.ini file or the rules tab, and we should get presented with that same wizard, but this time we should have part of the model in there as well, and then the asset tag appended to it. The good news again is that we know that it took the input for the asset tag field, which is great. That's really the whole point, right? So we were able to go from an out-of-the-box MDT wizard to creating our own custom pane. We tweaked the HTML for the visual, tweaked the VB script for the functionality. We were able to test it in the Wizard Studio, and then we were able to test it in our production environment in the Wizard Studio, and then in a live deployment we were able to verify that it took the input for the asset tag. So we're doing pretty well, Alright, and here we go, processing the bootstrap.ini again, and now we're going to process the custom settings.ini. And we're going to go through all the default settings, and while that runs, let me just show you what that's doing if you guys are not familiar already. It's going to process everything that's in default here, brackets. And I also have a subsection in here just because I like to be as organized as I can. So after it processes, it's going to go right back down to skip wizard panes, which is where I bypass everything. So let's hop back over here, still processing. Okay, here we go, and we'll make this one 115553. We'll hit next. We will choose a task sequence. There we go. Now that we have part of the model in there, we have virtual 115553. So the whole model name is virtual box, but since we only took the first 7 characters starting from the left, we have virtual, and then we have the 6-character asset tag that we put in. So I know it took 4 videos. I know this video is running a little over 20 minutes now, but you can see now the value of being able to customize the wizard pane. So now, in this scenario that we went through, we have a deployment tech that is imaging some machines. He or she can place an asset tag on an actual desktop, go ahead and boot the machine up, start loading the boot image. We're going to do all this stuff over the network preferably, or maybe some offline media with a flash drive or a disk of some kind. And then they'll get presented with this wizard. They'll just type in the numbers that they see on the sticker that's on the actual hardware, and then away they go. So I just want you guys to see the real-world applications of being able to customize the MDT wizard. This was a very simple example where all we're doing is just customizing the OSD computer name by adding the asset tag value to it. But in subsequent videos, I'll show you guys some really cool stuff where we'll add some drop-down boxes for departments and for things like branch office locations. So thank you guys for hanging tight with me. I know it's been kind of a long journey to get here, but thank you guys for watching. Thanks for listening, and I will see you guys on the flip side, all right? Take care. Have a good one.